Welcome to this morning's press briefing, the purpose of which is for the Complaints Commissioner, Mr. Elton Georges, to discuss his 5th annual report, which will be laid on the table in the House of Assembly at the next sitting of the House. I now invite the Complaints Commissioner, Mr. Elton Georges, to make his presentation.
I am pleased to welcome you to this, our very first press briefing for this year. The purpose is mainly to introduce our 5th annual report, the report for the year 2013, which was to have been laid on the table of the House tomorrow, but I understand that the sitting has been postponed. However, we will continue with the conference, and I will also take the opportunity to look back briefly over the 5 years of the existence of this office. In my remarks at the press briefing back in February 2009 on accepting this appointment, I said then that the new office was to some extent an experiment. I said that because I was aware of quite a bit of skepticism in some circles about the need for such an office in the territory of the Virgin Islands, and also because I was aware that in at least one other overseas territory where the office had been opened in the 1990s, it had not thrived. And so I said that the eventual success of this experiment would depend heavily on the quality of service that it produced, especially in the first years, the foundation years. In turn, I continued, the performance of the office would depend first on how well we at the Commission educated the public and the public service about the functions and the powers of the Commissioner, and secondly, on how much the residents of the territory and the members of the House of Assembly used the service provided, availed themselves of the services of this office. I continued, and I quote, "The Complaints Commissioner is for everyone who has a genuine grievance with a government department or other government agency." My vision of the office is that it is one that aims to improve the overall quality of public administration as officials come to learn, or rather to be reminded, because they mostly already know, through our investigations and the reports and recommendations that follow, the standards that they should meet in their dealings with people. Governor David Peary was a bit more confident in his expression. He said, "I am confident, therefore, that in the BVI context, the creation of this position will raise standards of governance, administration, and service provision in the BVI." And by the way, these remarks gave rise to our motto, raising standards in the public service, in the public sector. What has been the reality? On the point of educating the public, we talked about how well we educate the public. I believe that we have done a decent job of informing and educating the public. But we are every now and again brought back down to earth when we hear from some resident who has been here all the time that they had not heard about the office. It's a constant challenge. Just last week, I was told by a gentleman in my office that he had only very recently heard about the existence of this office, and he was speaking to another gentleman who was in the same position. And so we realized that we have more work to do. The press has been our main resource in this endeavor of getting the word out about the office. But it is clear that a more vigorous direct speaking campaign program to groups in the community is indicated in order to reach pockets of residents who do not regularly read the news or listen to broadcast media. On the point of use of the office, I would say, and this is my opinion, there has been fair success in having members of the public use the office, subject to the constraint of those who know about it, as I just said, but not quite enough as yet. We have indications all the time of a fair number of justified complaints out there, complaints that people have not been able to resolve with the departments that don't come to us for various reasons. On the other hand, because of our very tiny staff, we are still stretched to capacity because of the number of approaches that we have had in relation to the size of the staff. As to the House of Assembly, we have not received a single request for an investigation from any member of the House of Assembly, and I've, over the years, commented on this in my annual reports. That is still a sector that has not opened up as yet, as it were. Now, regarding the strategic vision that I expressed, and as I said, was expressed more confidently by Governor Peary, of general improvement in service standards, I doubt that anyone would say that Mr. Peary's confidence has been as yet justified. But then he did not set a time frame. So he did not say that this will happen in 3 years or 5 years, which is what we are now at. So in that sense, he didn't take any hostage to fortune. But it is becoming clearer and clearer that this is a marathon rather than a sprint. It's a slow grind rather than a cakewalk. It is also clear that this office, this position, to use Mr. Peary's word, is only one of several that are concerned with the job of raising standards and improving service delivery. Our audit agencies, our Deputy Governor's Office, our training division, and others, not to mention the individual heads of ministries and departments, have key roles to play, and all of these agencies I mentioned also need the support of the political directorate in the cabinet and in the House of Assembly. Commensurate with its mandate and its resources, however, the Commission has, in my view, had a positive impact in nudging service standards in the right direction and in providing a voice for the sometimes voiceless. We have striven to bring service charters, for example, back into the conversation and have had some success in getting government agencies to improve their own attitudes towards and handling of complaints that they receive, which itself is an important element in raising their standard of service. Nonetheless, we have had failures that we can point to that are spectacular. Our very first own motion investigation, and you will recall that, you'll see it in the report, that the Complaints Commissioner can initiate an investigation on his own. And our very first one, back in 2010, that report was issued into the way in which millions of taxpayers' dollars in electricity connection subsidies are disbursed, pointed out a set of glaring problems and recommended fixes for them. The faults included the usual suspects, complete lack of transparency, arbitrary decision-making, at times almost capricious decision-making on who gets how much, lack of responses or long delayed responses to applicants, unkept promises, and so forth. Lack of response from the Ministry for Communications and Works, which was the ministry concerned with that program, led to it being our fourth special report to the House of Assembly in early 2011. As far as I could determine from my recent inquiries, nothing has changed. Subsidies continue to be given to the lucky few who hear about the programs, and who find favor in some way with successive ministers in office. Not much more success can be claimed with the other major investigation we did into the handling of applications for certificates of residence, as made clear in the report before you, in the 2013 report. It is a global village, and the lack of response made it into an international report, into the International Ombudsman Institute's annual report. There's a mention, as pointed out, of that particular investigation and the absence so far of government response. As indicated in the report, our territory's ambitions to be a major player on the world stage, not a major player, will be doomed to fall short if our governments do not give attention to the requirements of good governance. But more importantly, citizens lose trust if my applications for a license, a permit, and the like are not handled professionally in a transparent fashion, if I'm not given reasons for an adverse decision, if I see others getting the same thing that I applied for no apparent reason, then I cannot trust the government agency. And if I cannot trust the government, I may not invest as much in improving the community as I otherwise would. So it's important that these recommendations are looked at seriously and treated with the respect that they deserve. As I come to the end of these remarks, with reference to the highlights noted in the foreword to the report, I must make one important correction. On page 7, it stated that during 2013, we reached one major breakthrough in that it was the first time that the government had actually accepted a recommendation to pay and had paid money to a complainant in recognition of the distress caused by maladministration. That is not quite true. As reported in our 2011 report, if you look back to that report, following our intervention, an artist had in that year collected a token amount of $2,000 for artwork destroyed 3 years prior, while being returned to him by a government agency that had borrowed the artwork. I would say that the two payments are qualitatively different in that in this case just mentioned, of course, it was by way of compensation for actual loss in terms of value, even though the government did not accept liability. Nonetheless, we were speaking about physical objects of art that were destroyed in a fire on the way back to the artist. Whereas in the case in 2013 that I mentioned as a breakthrough, it was in recognition of the distress that the complainant had suffered over government failures in administration. Nonetheless, as it is stated in the report, it could be somewhat misleading, and I deeply apologize for that error. Otherwise, I commend the report to your close attention and would be willing to take questions. Plans for the future of the office would have to be left to my successor when appointed. But as I mentioned in the report, the Ombudsman institution is growing in recognition and importance internationally. And I expect that this commission, my own expectations, are that it will grow from strength to strength. I believe we have laid a firm foundation for that. But that cannot be taken for granted. and I say that because ombudsman offices in some Caribbean jurisdictions have languished, and some are struggling right now, even after they had made promising starts. Constant vigilance and dedication to the principles of good governance, and those principles include transparency, accountability, respect for the rule of law, on the part of all concerned, including you, ladies and gentlemen of the press, is essential to ensure that institutions like these will continue to exist and to make a difference. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. My question to you, Mr. George, is when will you actually leave the office? And in answering that, what would be your most successful ventures, or venture while serving as Complaints Commissioner, and your least successful venture?
Thank you for the question. These questions are all difficult. Most successful, least successful. The first one first, when am I leaving? At present, I have been asked and I have agreed to stay on until November, let's say the 30th of November. And therefore that's the time when I would be finishing. Most successful venture and least successful. I think I already indicated in my introductory remarks what I regard as failures. I was hoping that I could get government to agree to make changes, important systemic changes in the way that the government funds were disbursed for subsidies when people were asking for money to help with the cost of connecting electricity to their properties. And the recommendations were, run-of-the-mill, good administration, publicize the program so that everybody knows. Set the program up, say who is eligible for assistance, say what are the terms and so on, and so that everyone would know, instead of the fact that as it happened, only persons who happened to hear about it by word of mouth from somebody who happened to know about it, or someone who had a friend in the ministry, or who their representative in the House of Assembly may know about it, will go and through that avenue get to know about it. So those kinds of basic things. That's what we call transparency, information to the public. And up to now, that program is being operated, and up to now there has been no public acknowledgement or announcement of that program so that persons would know about it. So, that kind of thing, I see as a failure. We pointed it out, we recommended it, and nothing has happened. And as I said, the number of other systemic changes that one wants to see that are very slow in coming, in the area of record keeping, it's still a constant struggle. We find when we're investigating complaints, and the Labor Department has been frequently involved in this, we find that the keeping of the records of what happens, the records of meetings and so on, putting important things in writing is still lagging behind, and we still have to be repeating the same kind of recommendations over and over. Speaking about labor, we also, of course, had a lot to do with the matter of the settlement of employment disputes and the appointment and support of a tribunal, which the Labor Code calls for. I am sorry that up to now that tribunal is not active, even though a chairman has been appointed, and I know that they are gradually getting the regulations and other things in place, but it still remains a fact that 4 years after the act has been passed, it is not yet active, and no announcement has been made as to when it will be active. But on the plus side, you asked for the most successful. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that as to my most successful endeavor. But it has been very satisfying to be able to get persons who were at a complete end of their tether with trying to get a response from government, to get them to get a response at last. The examples we give in our annual reports from year to year, you will see in a number of cases where it is our intervention that caused someone, in one case, a lady who had been very much hurt in a traffic accident, was very frustrated because the driver of the other vehicle had been charged late, and then the trial hadn't taken place for a reason she couldn't understand. And so she finally came to us, like a police officer recommended she come to us. And we were able to get to the bottom of that and to have that trial take place finally. So at least some little satisfaction was obtained. So there are a number of those. I can't say. We're very happy when we can assist and to get into something and dig into it and get some results. I recommend you look in the report, look in the sample cases and so on.
Thank you. I'd like to pose another question, this one in relation to something you said as well about the Labor Tribunal not yet active 4 years after the act was passed. And in a similar vein, a Human Rights Commission bill and the Freedom of Information bill and the Legal Professions bill that you consider, of course, the office considers to be very important in executing its duties. They have not yet been passed in the House of Assembly, and it seems as though there is some tiredness on the part of the government to get these instruments in place so that the matter of human rights in the territory could be exercised. What then could be the reason for this? Is it pure administrative or institutional weakness, or is it merely a BVI culture?
No, I wouldn't want to speculate in the direction that you are asking me to speculate there. There are a number of reasons for why successive governments, again, it has to be stressed, this is not one administration, have failed to bring these bits of legislation through. In the case of human rights, I understand that there's a draft law that's soon to be taken to the House, and so on. In the case of freedom of information, it's been, 7 years, maybe 8 years since that draft has been done by the Law Reform Commission and has been sitting around, and in many successive speeches from the throne, governments have promised to bring it forward. Part of the hesitation, of course, may have to do with another problem that we see, which is the resources to enforce, to implement legislation. And In the case of the labor code you mentioned, say with the tribunal, and it's only one of the many, many, many provisions of the labor code that have not been implemented. You will see that there, for example, it mandates an annual publication of a policy of and labor and employment by the Minister for Labor, and I have not seen any such published. But we do have this problem also of legislation being passed and then the infrastructure, the resources to implement it, and the infrastructure to be put in place, the environment for it to be implemented, not being done. And that gives rise to complaints also and maladministration. And so I would say that in the case of the Freedom of Information bill, that it clearly is going to demand, when it is put into practice, is going to demand some resources, some investment by the government in ensuring that they can deal with the requests that come for freedom of information. And they do have to carefully assess what is going to be required, because otherwise it's passed and then you get the complaints, not the request for information under the Act not being addressed. And then we're told that, well, we don't have the time, we don't have the staff. With the same staff, we are trying to do all of this. So I think there are hesitations to do with that, to assessing the resource and the administrative requirements and seeing that they have it in place before it is done. But there may also be reasons of again, as I said in the case of the Complaints Commission, skepticism as to whether we want to go this way or not. I don't know. But we do know that this is the direction in which modern public administration is going, and the BVI needs to, I think, get on that bandwagon.
Mr. George, Guy Phoenix, Phoenix Caribbean.
Oh, yeah.
I have a good morning. You've obviously been with the office since its inception and guided and nurtured it to its current point. If you could impart one piece of advice to your successor, what would that be?
These simple-sounding questions are so difficult. One piece of advice, if I can impart to my successor, what would that be? How would I phrase it? It would be, I think, what I've been saying, don't expect immediate results. That's what I think I will tell him or her. Don't expect immediate results, but just keep pressing on regardless.
Thank you.
Not very practical, just psychological, but
Mr. Georges, good morning. Gordon French, BVI Platinum News.
good
You
morning.
mentioned earlier in your opening remarks that the Complaints Commission has the authority to go out and do his or her own
Yes.
investigation. Why didn't you go out and do more investigations instead of waiting for persons to come forward with complaints?
Well, we had quite a few people coming forward to complain. We didn't go out and do more investigations because, but partly because, really, again, of lack of resources. There are 3 of us total in the office, and at any one time somebody may have to be out for any reason that leaves 2. When there are 2 people in the office, it's hard for him to take a laboratory break because someone might come through the door. But that is one of the reasons that we haven't done more on motion investigations in the time that we've been here. They take a lot of digging and research. And with 3 persons, and remember, you have to do everything that has to be done in an office. There's all the administrative work, the record keeping, the accounting. It takes up a lot of time, and the government accounting system. And all of that has to be done by the staff, and so it becomes physically impossible to do more on motion investigations. I do have my successor, and I hope that he or she is provided maybe with at least 1 additional member of staff. I do have for my successor some of the ideas, that we had for investigations that need to be done.
Who's responsible for staffing? Is it you personally or?
No, the staffing decision is put in the hands of the governor. And the way the act reads, and I thought it bothered me, is that the commissioner shall have such staff as the governor decides is necessary. However, even if the governor were to decide that it is necessary, it still has to be funded. And in that sense, it becomes a decision of the government, of the cabinet, whether and when to fund a position for a member of staff. And over the years, we have made the request, and it has not yet been funded. Whenever the budget comes out, it's not funded.
Do you think that's deliberate?
I would not say that it's deliberate aimed at the Complaints Commission, because that would be being a bit arrogant. I know there are a lot of offices that have the same problem, that they think they do not have enough staff. We think that there are some that are overstaffed, and we could probably get, but there are a number of offices that cannot get the things, not only staff, but other resources that they're asking for, because it has been a period from 2009 to now of austerity. So no, I would not say that it's deliberate at all. I think if there weren't a general cutting back and cutting down, we may have. I have to say that there have been suggestions by the outgoing governor that their thought is being given to appointing a Human Rights Commission and having the Human Rights Commission and the Complaints Commission share staff. The Human Rights Commission will have its staff, which will include a lawyer that we've been asking for. So that is one thing that has been floated now in the past 2 years, actually. It's been being floated that the Complaints Commission staff, and particularly that lawyer that would be on the Human Rights Commission staff, and particularly the lawyer, we could be housed under the same roof and could serve both offices. And that would at least be better than it is at present.
Question about staffing still. The Deputy Governor's Office, I was told, set up some kind of mechanism to capture complaints. Now I'm wondering whether that, how does it affect your job and in terms of the Commission, because they now have their own separate mechanism. And how do you hope that you could bridge the gap between that mechanism and your office?
Well, as I think I've made reference to it in the report, that mechanism, that's something that we encourage, because we know that we can't handle all the complaints if they were just to come to us. A lot of the complaints should be and could best be handled at the departmental level. And so that's what we have been from day one. From in my first month or two, I think I sent a circular around to government departments, certainly, to urge them to set up their own complaint system, and I gave them uh, pointers on how it could be done, and we are ready to assist. Because, and then we would then take the complaints that are not resolved at that level. Every single service charter that they published over the last 12 years or so, all the government departments certainly, and a few of the statutory bodies have been putting out service charters. And there's always a section near the end of that that speaks about bringing complaints. If you're not satisfied with the service, and they set out the standards of service, if you're not meeting them, bring the complaint to head of department, then you go to the permanent secretary, then you go to the deputy governor, etc. But they didn't actually do anything about making that easy to do. And this is what we are saying. You already say that you have a complaint system, which you should have. Everybody should have it. And we think you should now really intentionally, deliberately set it out as a policy and decide who is going to take responsibility in the ministry or department and follow up and how you're going to do it. So that we then become a last resort, as we should be, for persons who still can't get their complaints resolved at the departmental level. So this is how we're hoping it's going to work. As we say in the report, it is not really yet fully functional, although there has been some progress. The forms are there, and people are being. We are referring a lot of complaints to them. You know, somebody comes and says, "Well, I couldn't get an answer to my letter." We refer it back to the department before we tackle it. Only if they don't deal with it, then it can come back to us. One of the things we do is we will continue to do is monitor how the agency is dealing with complaints. That's part of their standards of their standard of service, your attitude towards and how you deal with complaints.
Can you talk about that just a little bit more? If you've seen the approaches change over the 5 years within the departments and such?
Well, not very much in this particular initiative of putting in place what is called an internal complaint system. The government is really only last year and this year, I think 2012 it started, in 2013 is just really taking root and getting established. But yes, and in this we have seen some progress in the sense that, as I said, when we refer complaints now to them, well, we follow up, we completely monitor and follow up. So ministries, secretaries are getting better at following through with these complaints and keeping in touch with the complainants. Yeah. Yes.
On the issue of consumer protection, there have been legislative promises on that issue. There are concerns both as it relates to the public service, and I'll explain that, and privately. And concerns as it relates to issues and products that relate directly to government in terms of the Visa Electricity Corporation, water and sewerage. Is there an ambit within your office for lobbying to get this legislation as it relates to that on the books? And is that one of the recommendations that you've left for your successor?
It is not one of the recommendations. You're asking about consumer protection legislation?
There has been promises
Yes.
repeatedly
Yes.
that is going to come. There
Yes.
actually was an office, there is an office
Yes.
that
The Department of Trade and
that is
Consumer
supposed
Protection.
to deal with that.
But it has no legislation.
That's the point, and that's where I'm trying to get you to go.
Yes. Yes, that is something that I think I may have mentioned over the time, the 5 years I've been here, that is needed. It's another one of those those legislative projects that need to get going, because as I understand it, and I haven't seen it, but there is a bill been knocking around for some time now to give the legal underpinning to the whole matter of consumer protection, and for some reason it's not getting to the House and getting passed. Yeah, if you call it lobbying, that is something that, now that you raise it, that would be added to what I would say to my successor. They need to be lobbying about. But one particular aspect of that, and you spoke about the public utilities, that's electricity, water, and sewerage, for which we can take, of course, complaints, and we have had complaints directly about those agencies. But we have, this is a slightly different thing now. For private entities, we cannot take complaints. But one of the recommendations I've been pushing in the reports, as you might see, is for the government to hasten to set up a mechanism to take complaints against attorneys, against lawyers. We do have people come to us with such complaints, and some of them may nearly make you cry, the experience that some people have had in dealing with their lawyers. But there is no clear-cut machinery for dealing with those complaints. There's some provision in the court rules that is a bit involved if you find it, but as you know, the Legal Professions Act has been knocking around, the bill, I should say, it's not an act yet, has been knocking around since 2006, 2007. It's been to the House and out, it's been back to the House and out. It never gets to a second reading and a vote. And that makes provision to set up a body that, among other things, a body that would deal with the professional probity of the legal fraternity. And one of the things it would do is, and would be empowered to do, is to take and deal with complaints. And so we're very anxious to see that happen, because, as I said, we can't do anything about it. And I know that there are people who suffer. And so we have suggested that if there are other areas of the bill that are so controversial that it keeps being pulled back, that the government should at least seek to do that part of it, so people can have a recourse.
In the past, at a similar forum, Mr. Georges, you praised the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force. I think you said that they try when there are issues arise and that relates to them. Can you recall in any recent time having any complaint relating to the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force? Because I've heard of some on other forums, but has any come directly to your office?
Relating to the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, not any serious complaint that I can recall recently coming to us, no. And I continue to say that the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force is one of the more responsive. When we refer, they have a complaints officer, a complaints inspector, as they call it. And so a lot of the complaints that come to us from the Royal Virgin Islands, about the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, and there have not been a lot in recent times, but most of those are complaints that we can refer to them and that they have, for the most part, dealt with. So there may be complaints that are not reaching us, people are not bringing them to us, but the answer to your question is no. Police complaints is a special category of complaints. I know that in Bermuda they have for years now set up a separate police complaints authority. And in the Caymans, they are contemplating doing the same thing. I've seen their draft legislation. In the Bermuda, the Police Complaints Authority seems to be restricted, however, to reviewing how the police themselves handle the complaint. And here in the BVI, I think our office is almost in a similar position because we can review how the police handle a complaint, but we also can investigate a police complaint, a complaint against the police. And one of our early investigations back in 2010, 2011, I remember, was a complaint that the police were failing to do their duty in reports of a nuisance to a resident in Virgin Gorda. A complaint involving police that comes to us regularly is some regularity, has to do with noise. Again, when people are being disturbed by noise, the first recourse is to call the police. And if they don't get relief, then that becomes a complaint against the police. And we have been working with some of those.
Mr. Georges, you have basically issued reports relating to immigration and labor, and it was bluntly opined that perhaps the reason why there has not been the sort of response that you were hoping for is because there's neither consequence and interest in those subjects, considering there's a more expatriate-related, I don't want to say interest. Let's leave it at that, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. Can you comment on that opinion, please?
I would not say, and I have no evidence for saying that opinion is correct. I still put it in the more general area of respect for the rule of law. And that affects expatriate, it affects locals, however you classify people. That in cases where there's not a respect on the part of government agencies for the rule of law, you get these aberrations happening. In a community where people are more litigious, they're more ready to take the government to court, you probably would have seen more cases where decisions of the authorities would be challenged by judicial review. You take it before a judge to get the judge to say what the law is. In BVI, you don't have that happening very often. It happens fairly seldom. Although when it has happened, the persons who have challenged the decisions of the government have had fair success. You remember a year or two ago, I believe, someone challenged the decision of the Minister for Labour by judicial review, and the court said, wrongly done, do it properly. People don't do that, so we have. Yes?
So what areas do you think they would have taken government to court regularly if this was a community?
I beg your pardon?
You mentioned that if the society was different and persons were readily willing to take challenge the government in court, you would have seen more cases. I think I'm just paraphrasing what you just said. What areas, based on from where you're looking in, do you think you would have seen more court cases against government?
Well, in general, areas where people apply for things, permits, licenses, approvals. For example, you're denied, you're not given a reason. Or where the reason that you're given indicates that irrelevant matters were taken into account or relevant matters were not taken into account in coming to that decision. There are a number of such areas where I'm not being now specific on the in naming any particular department or anything, but I'm just speaking in general that those are the kinds of decisions which can be challenged in a court of law, where you think that it's been unfair for some reason, or where it's been arbitrary or capricious, or where there has been bias. If you think that there has been bias, where the person making the decision has an interest in the decision and should not therefore be making it, those kinds of things can be taken to court. If an official who's making a decision on your matter has an interest in a competing business or something with yours, those things can be taken to court. They tend not to be in the BVI context.
Complaints Commissioner, what are your responses to this statement? The enactment of legislation to address complaints against lawyers, and even as it relates to customer service issues.
Consumer protection?
Consumer protection in particular. These are out there, you've mentioned that, and people are looking forward to having these set up. But is this really likely? Can we look forward to this when even successive VI governments have failed to address issues such as a long overdue settlement by the Public Works Department dating back to 1981 for lands used for public purposes? Clearly the government itself is guilty of failing to address issues relative to consumer or customer relations, improving standards of consumer services and so forth in the territory. Can we really look forward to anything happening in the near future based on these on this trend?
Yes, there's always hope that it is going to happen. I understand that the Legal Professions Act is shortly coming back to the House of Assembly, and this time one hopes it's going to pass. I haven't heard about the consumer protection, but I know that the new permanent secretary in the Premier's office is keen on it, and I'm hoping that it is going to happen. But the cases you mentioned, are discouraging cases where the government or parts of the government are guilty of these kinds of long, outstanding failures to deal with matters that citizens have. 2 years ago, I remember the one was that lady who in Seacoast Bay had applied for permission to reclaim land. As I pointed out in the report, and in fact I asked the question, whether the message is that she should have done like others did, which is start to reclaim, and then afterwards seek permission, which happened in most of the cases of the reclamations in that area, and afterwards they did get permission. But she, as we say here, walked behind the law and requested permission first. And this was what? Was it 10 years later we were dealing with it? She had not yet received a reply, permission. Those are extreme cases that, however, point out a malady. And I have to say that lady is still, I think she's still trying to get all clear for her project to proceed. So they have not rushed to assist, but it's in process.
And principally, as it relates to the commission, in 2009 there were 5 completed investigation reports, 14 in 2010, 8 in 2011, 5 in 2012, 3 in 2013. There seems to be an obvious reduction in the number of investigation reports there, and you've mentioned that in the report, citing some of the reasons. But what I find interesting is that in 2009 there were 24 recommendations, 57 in 2010, 56 in 2011, 41 in 2012, and 13 in 2013. And one has to ask, is it that the office is being overlooked, or are these recommendations being taken on board seriously by the government, so to speak, across the board?
Well, one explanation for the reduction in the numbers from the high point of 2011, 2012, 2010, really 2011, and 2012 was less than 2011, and 2013 is really much less, is that we may be, I think we're getting a little more sophisticated in making our recommendations, targeting them more more concisely. And
is that making it more difficult, or is it that you're making it more difficult to actually?
No, I'm not making it more difficult, but we're not repeating recommendations we made before. We'll refer to them, and we are maybe targeting them a little more precisely. But the question you ask is whether the government was ignoring recommendation. No, I mean, if you read my report, you'll see that I complain. I complain that the compliance level with the recommendations that are made is fairly low, all things considered, and especially with the systemic recommendation. That's where you make recommendations to improve a process, to update legislation and that kind of thing. That's been a disappointment, but again, I temper it by saying that, these things do take time. This is government. The wheels grind pretty slow. And I think that if we keep pushing in the right direction, it is going to happen.
And finally, when we were here last, I heard you mentioning, Mr. Georges, of the need for a lawyer to work along with you.
Yes, and we've spoken about that, yes.
And that has not materialized, obviously.
Not yet. As I said, there has been talk. I wouldn't go to the level of saying it's a promise, but it's certainly been discussed, and I have been told that it's being seriously discussed, that when the Human Rights Commission is established, the idea would be to house us in the same space, not necessarily here physically, but that we share office space and we share staff, including a lawyer. And so we will have the legal thing. Speaking about the physical space, of course, this is a trivial matter perhaps, but in our reports we've said from year one, while this is a lovely space and pretty and whatnot, we have been asking to be relocated because of access matters. And in fact, people could complain, and I wish they would complain maybe to the governor or the government, handicapped people, that they can't get up to the office because of the access. It's just one stairway. So we needed to be either on the ground or in a building where someone could, in a wheelchair, could come up in the elevator and just wheel to the office. That is still something that we are pressing for.
Mr. Georges, Kathy Richards from Virgin Islands News Online. A quick one. Could you give the reason why you were asked to hold on for another few months, and do you have any idea as to who might be your successor?
Yes, this position was advertised, as you know, about a year ago, and so the government is being very deliberate in taking its time. I should say the governor, because this falls to the governor about the process of succession, and the applications and so on were in, I think, By the end of January, panel was set up, but the panel, because of people are busy people and things happening, could not meet to interview, shortlist and interview people before June. And that's what's kept it back. It's an important position, and therefore they had to be very deliberate about it. And so I think interviews were not held till late June, and the governor was presented by early July with a recommended successor or two. And the process then started of consultation, because the governor, as you know, appoints after consultation with the premier and the leader of the opposition. My understanding is that consultation process is ongoing, and for that reason, I was at first asked to stay until the end of August, now until the end of November, when it's expected that the decision would be made and the successor would be able to take office.
The second part of the question.
What's that?
Do you know who are likely?
I was told who is the premier candidate. I don't think I'm at liberty to tell you that here, to comment on that. You'd have to ask the governor, and he might, the new governor.
This is the final question, please.
Because with the process of consultation going on, it's very delicate. I don't know whether she's had responses yet from the premier and the leader of the opposition, so it would be premature for me to say anything about that.
Is that a male or female candidate? Or?
It is a male or female, yes. That's correct.
All right, my final question to you, Mr. George, is now, you have investigated complaints. I know in 2 instances you were challenged publicly, one being the Labor Tribunal and one being the Sikh House Bay matter. Can you say that you've adjudicated fairly and justly as you prepare to leave office?
I think so, but you know, those judgments are for others to make. And a number of things I've been saying about the office, in my opinion, I think that I took the office off to a good start. I think I laid a firm foundation for a successor to build on. Those are my opinions. I think it's for others to say what they think and to make that judgment. But yes, I have striven to be judged fairly, to go where the evidence leads, as I explained to persons that we are interviewing, against whom complaints have been made, and to persons who make complaints that we are not on any side, we are impartial, and we just look for evidence and draw conclusions from that. And I know that there could be disagreements about the conclusions we reach, the findings we reach, and about the recommendations. But because, the Supreme Court of the U.S. with 9 members, 5 go on one side, 4 on the other, same case. But we just ask for the government, the agency, to engage with us. If you don't agree with a recommendation, say so, or finding, say so, and why. That's what you call respect. That's all we're asking for, respect. Unfortunately, Mr. French, too often we don't get that level of engagement. The findings go, the report goes, the recommendation goes, and nothing, no response comes back. Okay, and that is something I really hope will change more as time goes on, and it's clear that this office is here to stay. Aisha, what's your final question?
Oh,
No question. Thank you very much.